Mainly going to talk about Neopestalotiopsis, leaf spot and fruit rot of strawberries. This is a relatively new disease in Alabama. It's a mouthful to say, about 8 syllables there, but this is a disease we just started seeing in the last couple years. So first off, there are a lot of different leaf spots we see in Alabama, things like phomopsis, leaf blight in the upper left, leaf scorch, common leaf spot in the bottom left, all fungal foliar diseases. Oftentimes we see these maybe in the fall or in the spring after a commercial grower stops spraying. These will pop up. Oftentimes these are common in home gardens where there's no fungicide management. Usually cool to warm, wet conditions favor these fungal problems, like most fungal diseases. Bottom right, you can see angular leaf spot. This is a bacterial disease that we do get in the spring. I've seen it so far this year in 1 or 2 fields. Minor problem. Cool, wet conditions favor bacterial or angular leaf spot. Typically, you can control it with copper, but more than likely, as temperatures rise, the disease will dissipate. We want to focus on Neopestalotiopsis, or Neo, or NPT. Picture on the left was a field in Escambia County that Jacob Kelly, our RA in the southwest section of Alabama, and Dr. Connor visited back in, I think, March of 2002, early March. And the grower had 3 different varieties, but one variety was getting hit hard by this foliar disease. It was Dr. Connor determined it was Neopestalotiopsis. And at that time, based on information coming out of Florida, we recommended to destroy the one variety that was hit so hard to try and prevent spread of the pathogen. That was a common practice in Florida and Georgia in previous years. I visited the field multiple times over the next month. The disease spread slightly, as you can see on the slide on the right, some of those leaf spots there. But we had went into a drought period during the month of March and early April. So Neo never really took off. It likes it warm and wet. And we were having relatively hot, dry conditions. And his bigger problem was spider mites versus Neopestalotia. But that was the first report in Alabama. So as far as it is a fungal pathogen. There are many species and strains of this disease. We think it may have transferred from rhododendron over to strawberries, because Pestalotia itself is a pathogen a fungus I've seen on weakened or dead plant material for some 35 years. Sometimes we call it Neo. There are some new species and also new strains of it. Some of these newest strains are more aggressive than some of the other isolates. University of Florida has produced a new PCR technique that will provide accurate identification of the aggressive Neo strains, which are at least 2. And so this year and past years, Dr. Connor has sent samples to Florida for a little more positive ID on the strain. Recent history, it was first reported in Florida in 2017. In 2018, it was reported across 3 farms in Florida, and those growers were forced to destroy over 80 acres mid-season. And then they stopped harvesting another 30 acres before the end of the season. And that's how bad the disease was. 2019 and 20, 18 farms reported the disease. About 200 acres of strawberry fields were destroyed in Florida that year. And the disease was more severe in organic production fields where obviously synthetic fungicides, which might slow the disease, were not being used. Georgia first reported the disease in 2020, and several sites there were decimated by Neopestalotiopsis. Typically, a common link between these outbreaks was the nursery source. This is the distribution that we've seen in Alabama over the last few years. We found it in 6 counties in 2022. Worst case was in Escambia County. The other 5 counties that we found it was just showed up late in the season and was not a problem for the grower. 2023, we saw it in 7 counties. It was did do some damage in Escambia County, or I'm sorry, Baldwin County. And I did see quite a bit of it over in Geneva County, but late in the season. Those counties reporting up north, the disease was minor, and it was more of an interest just to find it than it was doing any damage. It's been found in multiple states now across the United States and in Canada. And it's not because the disease is wind spread across all these states. It's mainly because it's coming in on plugs or on transplants. I think they traced it back to Canada. So it's sort of a national problem because it's moved so easily on this transplant material. A little bit about its biology. It's spread by wind and rain within a field. Irrigation can move it, as well as on farm equipment. It's favored by extended periods of wet weather and temperatures, say, between 75 and 85 degrees. Dry periods seem to inhibit spread of the pathogen, which we saw back in 2022 in Escambia County. And I talked to Dr. Natalia Perez in Florida, who's probably the expert on this disease in the United States, or is the expert. And she said the disease has not been as bad in Florida the last 3 years, with warmer, drier conditions during their production period of December through February. I talked to her again last month, and she said there were a couple hotspot fields, but overall, the disease was not as severe as it had been in 2018 through 20. Now, as far as symptoms, you have a leaf spot and then a fruit rot. So initially, you will get the leaf spot. The lesions are tan to brown with a regular distribution on the leaf surface, as you can see. You will get black fruiting spore-producing bodies within the lesions under moist conditions, and these develop under moist conditions. Sometimes we put these in a moist chamber, a plastic bag with a wet paper towel in the lab, just to get these to develop. These give rise to the fungal spores that can further spread the disease within the field, but we also use it to identify the pathogen. And then symptoms can be easily confused with other diseases, similar to the ones I've already showed you. So here's an isolate or a picture of Neo from North Alabama. I believe this was last year. Kind of looks like an eye spot almost looking back at you, but this looks quite a bit like pneumonia leaf spot. David Lawrence pointed that out, which is another fungal disease that has become more common in recent years. But this type of sample, we'd bring it back to the lab, put it under the dissecting scope. You can see in that second picture there, the black pepper spots forming within the lesion. Then a close-up of what happens after they're put in a moist chamber, more or less. You see these spores curling out of these, I believe it's perithecium. And then the spores in the bottom right, multiseptate, dark and clear at the same time, and they'll have flagella or these appendages at the end. So it's kind of a cool looking spore, easy to identify. However, in some cases, we will send some of these samples off to Florida to identify, to see if we have one of these aggressive strains that Florida has detected. And we have found one aggressive strain in Alabama this year. So you also have fruit rot and root and crown rot symptoms. We have not seen root and crown rot yet in Alabama, or not been able to detect it. Fruit spots are tan brown and slightly sunken, eventually turning black, and may cover large portions of the fruit. And they can be easily confused with other fruit rot diseases such as anthracnose, especially early in their development. In severe cases, Neo can infect roots and crowns, leading to death of infected plants. This is what was happening in Florida and also probably in South Georgia, but Dr. Connor and I have not been able to detect these phases of the disease in our samples collected in Alabama, fortunately. So this is from that initial field that Dr. Connor and Mr. Kelly, Jacob found in near Bruton. This is about 3 weeks after the initial finding. On the left, you can see some of the leaf spots that they found earlier. The disease did spread to some of the other varieties, but it was minor at best. But you can see that black lesion forming. It's sunken. It's large, definitely different from anthracnose, which I'll show a picture of. But it can cover the entire fruit eventually, and we can produce spores off that lesion quite readily. So same picture on the right is NPT. On the two slides on the left, you could see symptoms of anthracnose fruit rot, which also can be sunken, grayish brown to black. Normally you get maybe a pinkish spores coming off as orange pink spores. And it's possible to get both diseases on the same fruit, which I learned down in Geneva County last year. So both diseases are quite damaging, but Neo probably tops the list. This last year, this was mid-May down in Geneva County. I was visiting a grower, and I was there to look at tomatoes and squash, but he had strawberries. He had a good crop, and I just asked, could I wander through them? They were out of production. It was already about 86 degrees that day, but I did come across Neo in his field. He had it the previous year, just a light amount, a little bit more this past year. This was at the end of the production cycle. He had stopped spraying for a few weeks, so the disease sort of took off. Did see some fruit rot as on the right. Unfortunately, I was at the fruit were just so warm they disintegrated by the time I got them to the lab. But this is mixed in with anthracnose in this field as well. So this is some recent information out of the University of Florida lab, Dr. Natalia Perez's program, who is the expert in the U.S. on this. They have the disease in their backyard, so they are capable of doing a number of different trials. Just some information that they've deduced over the last couple of years is that the fungus survives the summer on strawberry residue in Florida. What they suggest there is early crop destruction after harvest and then disking to break down plant material as soon as possible. The reason for this is that the pathogen survives on strawberry crowns for up to 17 months and for approximately 6 months on decomposing leaves. They do recommend pre-season bed fumigation, or it is effective based on their trials, but that the pathogen can remain or can survive within the alleys that have not been fumigated. And then flat fumigation, where you cover an entire area, is effective to rescue highly infested fields. But of course, this is quite expensive. They have done a number of fungicide trials and have noted that treatments with a combination of switch and thiram perform best. Switch application should be timed when extended wet periods are expected. We don't want to overuse switch. It is a curative type product, but we also use this product for anthracnose and botrytis, so we don't want to overuse it to develop resistant strains. Typically, you'd go with switch and thiram, or what I recommend this year to a grower in Alabama is start off with switch and thiram, then switch on over to a DMI product such as Inspire Super and Orbit, mix that with Captan, then use these combination products for rotation about once a week. Mainly because you have to consider other diseases such as botrytis, gray mold, and anthracnose, and be concerned of developing resistance to more fungicide groups. We don't want to lose switch for use on anthracnose by trying to control Neo. So disease risk management is very important. So as far as management, purchase plugs or transplants from a reputable nursery, and even these reputable nurseries are having problems getting clean material. As I said, it can be coming in on plugs all the way from California, or Canada, sorry. Inspect plants carefully for symptoms of NPT. We did detect symptoms on transplants in the fall this year in a couple fields. I'll show you a shot of one of those. All commercially available cultivars that are grown in the Southeast are considered susceptible to the pathogen, but there are breeding programs underway right now. We want to limit field operations when the plants are wet to avoid spreading the pathogen. You can remove and destroy infected plants where practical. And this is what we recommended to the grower in Escambia County a couple of years ago, where just one of the 3 varieties he had were heavily infected. Clean and disinfect equipment between fields. Switch and thiram are the only product that provide that are the most effective for leaf spot control and do provide suppression of fruit rot. And NPT is already resistant to the frac group 11 fungicides, which would include Abound and Cabriel. So I'm going to take you some slides of Neo over the last couple of years, and I'll also talk about some other diseases that I've been seeing this spring. But this was a field in Macon County. Grower received transplants. Actually, a grower in Blount County, I believe, received transplants. Shared them with a grower in Macon County. When I went to visit this grower in Macon, I was able to find Neo's symptoms on the foliage. These plants probably had 3 true leaves on them. Symptoms were present, brought them back to the lab, and you can see those spores coming out underneath the dissecting scope. You see little black pepper spots in those middle slides. So it was coming in on transplants here. This strain was not considered to be one of the more aggressive strains, as Dr. Connor sent samples down to Florida. Jacob Kelly visited a grower down in Baldwin County back in mid-February of this year. Sent some samples in. I visited a grower a few days later, and you can see he had a problem developing pretty rapidly. You can see the plants on the left with those random leaf spots, also some dead leaves down low, same on the right. One thing they mentioned out of Florida was that plants infected with the crown rot and or the root rot phase oftentimes will show a reddish cast to the older leaves. I'm not sure that's what I was seeing in that middle picture. That's why I put it in there to remind me to say that. We were not able to pull the disease out of that sample there, but that's something to be looking for when you're looking for NPT. So with this grower, I recommended starting off with switch and thiram immediately, rotating with a DMI plus Captan, then coming back with switch a week later. He instead, I believe, sprayed switch and thiram every 3 days for the ensuing couple of weeks, which is not what I wanted him to do due to resistance management problems. However, I came back 3 weeks later after a meeting I had down that area, and it did clean it up quite a bit. I did still find some leaf spot symptoms, and he was starting to put some fruit on down there, but that did clean it up. But I did try to strongly recommend that he alternate fungicides and not just stick with switch, especially on a 3-day time period. I also went up to Bruton, to Escambia County, to the field that had Neo, or where we first found Neo in 2022. And he also had a few plants that showed leaf spot symptoms, but it was very minor. Did see some of that reddish tinge to the older leaves. Collected those samples. We also could not pull Neo out of those plants. So I'm not sure if that was spray damage or something else going on. But it was there. I'll have to go back down, or Jake will have to go back down to see if this disease has started to increase. Went up to Chilton County with David Lawrence here a few weeks ago, just to visit some growers and see what we could see. I did not find any Neopestalotia in these fields. David and we did see pneumonia leaf blotch, and David had brought this up to me at the fruit and vegetable conference that Neo looked a lot like pneumonia, which has become a more common in fields in the last couple of years, from what I understand. You can see that eye spot that looks similar to what I showed you with one of my pictures of Neo earlier. But he mainly had pneumonia leaf blotch, and pneumonia is a foliar disease. Typically, the lesions I feel are more around the edge of the leaves versus dispersed across the leaf randomly, like with Neo. You do get pepper spots, as you can see in that center slide, and then you get these spore-producing structures on the right. But Dr. Connor showed me the difference between pneumonia spores and those of Neopestalotia, so they are quite different. Easy to identify. Pneumonia is not a significant problem. It's not one that causes yield reduction, or we have not experienced that. Rarely a problem, but definitely one that could confuse you with Neopestalotia. Same day or next day, I drove up to Hayden, Alabama. This grower had transplants that had Neo in the fall. Dr. Connor sent a sample down to the Florida lab. It was detected not to be an aggressive strain. Now, this grower told me, or his partner said, that they just took the row covers off, their winter freeze protection covers off the day before, 2 days earlier. And if I understood it correctly, they had those row covers on for 10 weeks. So I thought Neopestalotia was going to go crazy. Wow. But when I got to the field, he had some pneumonia leaf spot that you can see on the left. In the center, you can see pneumonia and also angular leaf spot, those little black spots you see in that bottom left leaf. He also had about 30% of a root rot of some type. I thought it was probably Phytophthora. He also had spider mites developing underneath those row covers. So we had a situation. This is probably a 1 acre of strawberries at the most. You can see some of the root rot or plants dying here. I did dig up the samples, run them back to the lab, shared these with Dr. Connor. We felt there was a root rot present, as you could tell by the pore sample in picture number 2. We did come out with, or Dr. Connor found Rhizoctonia root rot here. Rhizoctonia is a soil-borne fungal disease, and oftentimes in combination or some combination with Pythium, root rot, and Phytophthora, and even Pratylancus, the root lesion nematode, you can get a black root rot complex. That's what we thought we were dealing with here. And just to show you, on the sample on the left is a healthy root system, a lot of white fibrous root growth. On the second picture is the same slide I showed you a second ago, one that has the black root rot complex. So sometimes just digging up some of these plants that are dying, you could look at the crown, slice them open. If you see a reddish brown discoloration, you might be dealing with anthracnose, crown rot, or Phytophthora. If you see something like this, you might be dealing with black root rot. Some other things we've seen. This is a picture or a sample that David Lauren shared with Dr. Connor, I believe, last week. The picture on the left there, that's southern blight. You might call this white mold. That's on strawberries. We don't really see that on strawberries in Alabama. Picture on the right is the sclerotia of southern blight, which kind of gives it away. Now, that picture I took on tomatoes last year, but it's the same pathogen, has a wide host range, but you can see these seed-like structures. It's hardened mycelium. They could be anywhere from white to tan to brown. And oftentimes you'll see that white fungal mycelium or mold within the plant or on the tissue. This fungus comes in right at the soil line, typically girdles the plant, blocks or cuts off the water-producing vessels, causing the plant to wilt and die. So this was a unique situation. They had fumigated with, I believe it was a Picloram 60, which I thought would have taken care of it, but this was spotty in the field. So just one to be on the lookout for. And Dr. Connor is expecting a sample soon. I did get a call from Blount County about 10 days ago. New owners, but the same manager, farm manager. Not really well maintained. You can see some of the plants struggling on the left. It's sort of an odd field, if I recognize it correctly. I think it might be Phytophthora root and crown rot, where you see some of the leaves dying. But we have not gotten a good sample from this location to check for Phytophthora. But hopefully I can get up there, or Eric can get up there this week. Finish up, the 2024 Southeast Regional Strawberry Guide is available online. This is a great source of information put together by specialists from throughout the Southeast, and it supplies insect, disease, and weed control, talk about varieties. They put this together every year. This is just they only have an online version. You could also find this on the My IPM app. So my name's Ed Sikora. I'm an extension plant pathologist. You could always email me at sikorej@auburn.edu. Follow me at Twitter at Alabama Ed. I post pictures about 4 to 5 times a week of various diseases and crops. Strongly recommend, if you're growing strawberries, to Google the Southeast Regional Strawberry IPM Guide, the 2024 version. And you could also just look at that address on the bottom there and find it as well.